This is Jimmy Jive, and you're listening to Motor City Rock Talk. Today, I've got a member of a fantastic East Side band called the Hourlies. To date, they've got 3 EPs, one of which is a live EP, and a full-length album called Live With Yourself or Die Trying. Today, my guest is the lead guitarist for that band, Ben Kay. Hey, Ben, how you doing?
I'm great, Jimmy. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, my pleasure, man. So let's start with a little background. Tell me a little bit about where you're from originally, what kind of music you were, brought up on or influenced by, some of the bands and artists like that may have brought you into your career as far as playing guitar.
Sure. I think I had maybe the most archetypical suburban, Midwestern, long-haired white boy guitar player upbringing a person could possibly have. I grew up in Troy, in Michigan, like this total suburban white picket fence situation, kids playing street hockey, growing up kind of thing. And I got to give really all the credit to my dad on that one for me being a musician at all, even though he's not really a player. He plays the harmonica now, but he wasn't a musician. He just loved the blues. So, I grew up, my dad playing Johnny Winter records through the house on weekends, and that was kind of like the highlight of my weekend was, what blues album was dad going to play. Blues lead guitar playing really captured my attention from when I was a young kid. And then, this guy named Jack White had a career that perfectly coincided with me growing up and, being in middle school when those White Stripes albums came out. So, just the blues was just really there for me when I was a kid. And, you just had a friend of mine, Danny Muggs, on. And, I got to say, Danny would be one of the most influential guitar players for me when I was a kid, really for local guys.
Mm-hmm.
He was my Clapton when I was 13, for
Wow.
sure.
That's high praise. It's high praise. It's interesting that you talk about really being in the blues and playing the blues. I hear a lot of different styles in your playing and in the band. I mean, it's like a mishmash of rock, blues, punk, pop. I even hear a little bit of R&B flavor on the song Be Brave. It's a very interesting mix, a lot of humor, very clever writing. And some of your guitar work almost borderlines on hard rock and metal. Were you influenced in any way by any of those bands?
Yeah, that's so funny that you called that out. Yeah, really, I talked about the blues because that's how it started for me and my roots with my dad. But, from teenage years on, I'm really more of a heavy metal guy. It's not so much as a player in terms of bands I'm in, but as a listener, really, if I've got headphones on, it's like Testament or something like that. And the way that I ostensibly learned guitar, other than, of course, the guitar teacher I was blessed to have as a teenager, was Metallica. Metallica, right? I was such a James Hetfield Metallica kid when I was 13, 14, 15, 16. That was how I learned to play the instrument, was, aping heavy metal bands. The guys kind of pick on me for it. Tony in the Hourlies is an anti-heavy metal old bogey. It turns him off totally, and he gives me a lot of shit for it. But you know what? Joke's on him, because now he's in a metal band, and the stuff we've been writing more recently, I think, is going to reflect that too, and it's great.
Yeah, because a lot of your stuff, like I say, has got a bit of everything in it, man. It's like the entire kitchen sink. Who is the main writer in the band? Do you guys write as a group, or does somebody come in with an idea? I know your lead vocalist also plays guitar, obviously, but is there somebody specific that writes the song, or do you all write together?
So Chris and I have had like a Lennon and McCartney relationship for 15 years now. I've known the guy forever. We've been playing in bands together forever. And it's always been, I'm the guitar player and he's the poet and the writer and the singer. I would say since the pandemic, Chris has come out of his shell as a guitar player in a way that's just like exponential growth, just crazy. I would say his chops are probably better than mine right now if I had to play with him.
Damn good. I don't know if he's better than you are.
I just got to give the kid credit, especially
Sure.
for how fast he learned. But really, yeah, the dynamic has always been, I write the riffs, do a lot of the arrangement work, and Chris, ostensibly makes that into a song and writes the great dark poetry he does over it. But over the last couple of years, really, it is like 50-50 effort, being Chris, as far as the riff writing and the real core material.
It's really, really good, like I said. And the artwork on that album cover is really, I want to say, almost psychedelic. It tends back to like the 60s style stuff. Who did the artwork? Did you have somebody professionally do that for you, or where did that come from?
Well, we did have somebody who fancies himself as a professional artist do it for us, and he also happens to be our drummer. Matt did that, and he does, I would say, except for the odd Photoshop job from Chris, Matt does virtually all of our artwork. And we're so grateful to have a member who is, a guy with an art degree and can use that skill for us.
That's fantastic. He's very talented as far as that. Tell me, name the members of the band, and tell me what instruments they play.
Chris, who's the other guitar player and the singer, and then the venerable Tony Muggs plays bass for us, and then Matt Maniaci is our drummer.
Now, the other thing I noticed too, in checking out some of your older videos and all that, you did have obviously a bass player before Tony. What happened with that? Did he just lose interest, or?
Tony's bass player number 3.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
and he took a band that was struggling and really whipped us into shape, and has really, with all of his experience, really made us grow over the last couple of years with him. He's like my big brother. I just love the guy. So having him in my band is just such a dream come true for me. But yeah, there were 2 other bass players. Emily was the first one. Jarrett was the most recent one before Tony. You can catch him. I think he just joined the Idiot. If you haven't seen them before, I mean, talk about talented. They're like the best band in town.
Was it just a mutual thing? He just left to pursue something else? What happened there?
Sometimes it's sort of like how being roommates with your friends can be difficult. Sometimes being bandmates with your friends can be difficult, and you cross those streams over, and sometimes you just get a chemical reaction that's not ideal for everybody. I love that I can see him playing in other bands. I just saw him last week.
Speaking of changing bass players, and like you said, Tony Muggs from the Muggs is playing with you now. How much of a adjustment as a band did you have to make bringing in a bass player that plays bass on keyboards? Was that difficult to work with at first, or was it an easy transition?
There's so many ways to answer that question, actually. Because Tony's playing really changed the band, and he just brought this whole other element and really forced us to kind of grow up, and not take the easy way out in the writing process and really think about things in a more technical way. And because he brought that to us, that's kind of all tied into your question about accommodating his instrument. I don't think his instrument, like the difference between him being on a Rhodes keys bass and him playing on a Fender bass guitar, probably isn't really the difference there. I think it's the years between us and the years of experience he has, and his relationship with the blues, and having less of a relationship with punk or more,
Right.
more heavy material, really is what impacted us.
As far as like playing live, though, he plays obviously the Muggs as a 3-piece, and that's probably a simpler way to to adjust the sound. Did you guys have any problems as far as playing live, as far as adjusting to the tonality of a keyboard style bass as opposed to a regular bass?
No, there's not often technical issues, but I will say I have not seen an inch of stage left in 2 years.
No.
Tony gets his side of the stage, you know.
Well, he doesn't take up that
Sometimes I
much
miss
room.
being over there, you know.
All right.
No, but he's, because of the way his instrument is set up, he's got to be on one side.
And he prefers the left side, obviously.
Yeah, I miss being on stage left sometimes, but that's about it.
Let's get back to the recordings. Like I mentioned in the intro, you have 3 EPs. One of them was live, and a full-length album that you put out last year called Live With Yourself or Die Trying. Where did you record these albums? Were they all recorded in the same studio? Were they basement recordings? Where were they recorded?
So recorded and then mixed in 2 different studios. Recorded in Oak Park. The studio is called The Woodshed. Shout out to Woodshed Ed. He's the man. Great big room recording experience. Could not say enough positive things about working with Ed. Really, for how many tunes we did and how many layers there are, we really got in and out of there and really efficiently, which I love a guy who works hard and makes it worth your while. We had a good time over 2 weekends knocking out that whole album in, 4 12-hour days total at the Woodshed. And then, Tony's got a buddy, a very close friend of his named Carl. Carl Conrad is just one of the best engineers I've ever met. A real wizard and, a real hardworking guy. Just loves working on the product and working on the project. So we took it to him for mixing. And what's funny is, specifically on Live With Yourself, we recorded it 2 weekends and then mixed it for 8 months, 10 months. And, I loved the collaborative way that it went. Carl had us all hang out in his basement, and he had his monitor situation just set up immaculately, and we all got to be a part of that discussion, or at least watch Tony and Carl work, which was a good bit of it.
What about the live album? The live album, I believe, was done in Lincoln Park, was it? At some kind of event there?
Yeah, the Lincoln Street Park. We did that. Man, that was like pandemic. Nobody was playing it live.
Right.
Live music. We hadn't played out in 2 years or whatever, a year, however long it had been. We weren't doing anything really. A friend of ours named Spencer. Spencer's in a band called Hail Alien. Spencer runs a live online organization called No Experience, where he films live music and puts it out online. So it was just something that he asked us to do on a whim on a scorchingly hot July afternoon. That's all I remember from that was it was so damn hot. But that was, it was great to feel like we were playing out, even though there was obviously nobody there, in a way that was all, of course, safe and outdoors and all that COVID stuff. And it's something I go back to so rarely. When you said we had 3 EPs, it kind of caught me by surprise because I had totally forgotten about it. It was so long ago.
Well, the reason I ask about that live one is it's fantastic sounding. The sound on it they captured was incredible, especially since you're saying it was outdoors. I wouldn't have thought that. I would have thought, okay, this is indoors. This was, captured a certain way, that whole thing. But the sound on that is really, really good. Did you say they made a video of that too, or just audio?
I think parts of it are on video. I think just one song has a video that came out of that, which I think was Leaving Alone. I'd have to find it. But yes, Spencer, No Experience. That was all his work. And what's funny is a real punk rock DIY setup. When you say how well it came out, and he's really doing a lot with a little there.
But like I said, it was incredible. I thought, wow, I've heard some local bands do live stuff. The Mugs, of course, their live album was incredible, but I mean, that was indoors, and it was really, for you to say that was outdoors, on a hot July day, on top of that, is incredible. One of the songs I wanted to mention from one of the early EPs that really made me laugh was, I probably won't get the title right, something about we're all fucked.
Oh, you're fucked no matter what.
Yeah. Was there some kind of backstory to that in him writing that? Was he having a bad week? I mean, what inspired that? That's just such an interesting song.
First of all, let me just say that Chris would answer that particular question so much better. He even wrote the chords to that, all I did was write the little guitar doodles around his song. So, Chris, if I get this question wrong, please forgive me. You're fucked. For a while, Chris had a job that was just the kind of job that made you hate waking up every morning. And I remember watching him go through that. And, the way that Chris's wry comedy works and the way he expresses himself through writing poetry through that lens of, darkness, but also a sense of humor, I think is just a manifestation of that period of his life. At least that's where we were when he wrote it. I won't name any names here, but in the verses, if you know the words of the song, he's really, in my opinion, riffing on certain people in our lives.
Yeah.
I'm not going to mention who the oldest person at the Loving Touch is, but
Okay.
there's a couple names out there in contention.
That's interesting. I mean, like I say, all the songs, I really enjoyed all the songs. Matter of fact, the last time I cut my grass, which I think a couple of weeks ago, because we had some rain, I was actually, whenever I cut the grass, I always have my headphones on and listening to music. And I was listening to your latest album while I was cutting the grass, because it was like, wow, every song pumps you up. Every song is lyrically, clever. Everything about it is really good. I mean, the playing is exceptional. Everything. One of the songs on that, though, that really stands out to me, as I mentioned, I hear a little bit of R&B almost in your stuff, or at least in this song, was a song called Be Brave, where you have like the, go back and forth each other
the high and low
vocal.
vocals
Yeah,
and
yeah.
the real upstrokey stuff. So Be Brave's a cover, actually.
Oh, really?
It was this indie band from Texas that was, active when I was when I was in college. So let's say 10, 15,000 years ago. They were called the Strange Boys, and they're not active anymore as far as I know.
Mm.
I could be wrong about that, but yeah, I saw them at the Lager House in college, and their version of it, like fundamentally the same if you were going to write out the sheet music, but also kind of unrecognizable on a tonality basis. We really made it our own, and it's one of those cases where you go back and you hear the original, and it's almost like, oh, really, this is the same tune?
Song, like I said, really stood out to me because, like I said, there's different flavors in all the songs, but that one, for some reason, just like, wait a minute, kind of an R&B. It's funny you said it was done by a band from Texas, because I wouldn't have thought that, but it's just got a real interesting flair to it and stuff, and it's very enjoyable. Now, I know you guys are basically, from what I've seen in the videos and the places you played, an East Side band. What are some of the clubs that that you guys have frequented since you've been together?
Oh, no, we have to have a conversation, Jimmy, about where you're drawing the East Side line real quick.
Okay.
Hold on now, because it sounds like you're painting me as like a St. Clair Shores guy, like that
No,
Tony Muggs guy over there.
no.
I'm just, I've got my eye on you. That's all.
Okay.
I mean, Hamtramck, I think, is really the center of rock and roll in Detroit for the most part, in my experience. At least small ball barroom rock and roll, like we're accustomed to.
Right.
So, that whole spread of bars in Hamtramck, Outer Limits, I think especially, has really created a center hub for the scene and for the community. So Outer Limits is the first place I think of. If I had to guess the places I've played the most individually, which is probably also the places where Chris and I have played the most together,
Mm-hmm.
coincidentally, it would probably be the Lager House.
Okay. Like I said, when I mentioned East Side, I definitely would have been thinking Hamtramck Pub, Smalls.
Would be one, yeah, absolutely.
Those places. East Side used to involve, back in my day, back when I was playing, would have been Roseville, would have been Royal Oak, would have been, like you said, that kind of stuff there. The Ritz, New York, places like that no longer exist, and you probably never even heard of half of them, I imagine.
I played the Ritz.
Did you?
Oh yeah.
Did you play the
Oh yeah.
Ritz?
When I was a teenager, like before I would say I was in like a good band, if I've ever been in a good band. When I was a teenager, I played in metal bands that played the Ritz. Absolutely.
What year would that have been? Because you seem pretty young.
07 through 11. I joined the blues, 07 through 10. I think I was 20 when I joined Stegally and started playing the blues and got out of, playing hardcore music. But, for a while there, it was definitely bars like the Ritz.
I'm wondering if that was the original Ritz or the newer Ritz. Was that part of a complex with a bowling alley and another bar?
It was huge, but I don't remember there being a bowling. I remember the worst bathrooms in one, and I don't know what else.
That's interesting because the Ritz I'm referring to would have been more in tune with the 80s. We're talking the 80s, and it was done by the mid 90s. When you mentioned 2007.
Oh no.
And a lot of national acts played there. Were there national acts playing at the Ritz that you played at?
none that weren't washed up.
Well, that was pretty much the case in the original Ritz too. They
Yeah.
didn't have, they didn't have bands like Metallica or whatever. Another bar I'll mention that is there again borderline. I'll be shocked if you've ever heard of it. Blondie's on 7.
Okay, so Blondie's is just before my time.
Right.
There were punk shows growing
Yeah.
up there that like maybe the one, but I don't think so. I was a pretty big dork when I was a teenager. So, but I remember Blondie's being just over the hill for me at some point.
That was a real metal club at one time, like back in when we used to play there. It was a more metal club, and they had a lot of up-and-coming metal bands there. Megadeth played there, Slayer played there, a lot of those thrash-type bands there again in the 80s played there. But then the ownership changed and it became a punk bar. Roosevelt, who owns Harpo's, owned the place. And when it turned into a punk type of place, he got rid of it and it quickly shut down. There were just too many troubles there. As far as recording, did you say you have some new stuff you're working on? Do you have a new album in the works or somewhere down the line?
Yeah, we're approaching completion on LP number 2. We got some work to do on it still, but that's what's going on in my basement right now is the Hourlies cooking the next LP.
Is that where you rehearse, is in your basement?
Oh yeah, priority numero uno when buying the house was the practice space.
That's a good deal. And as far as the new album, is the material that's going to be on there similar to the last album, or are you guys going a little bit beyond that, or how would you compare the two as far as the songs?
I don't want to say anything bad about the first record because I think it's the best album I've ever been a part of. But I will say that I think this is a lot more grown up. I think generally the tunes are a little bit longer. We're writing a lot of those things in the 4:45 to 5:45 range in time, and because Chris has taken so many steps forward as a guitar player, and that has been part of the writing process instead of working him in to material that was there before that change. The songs are really more structured around the guitar harmony thing, and working with Tony on syncopation and a lot more more layered, thoughtful stuff. I think it may be a little bit more, how do I say this, relaxed in tempo. I think it's quite as jumpy and as excited as the first album is, but I think it's definitely thinking a little harder. It's harder to play, that's for sure.
There again, now on this album, is Tony in any way contributing anything as far as songwriting, or you guys still doing all the stuff yourself and him just writing bass lines around it?
The core material is coming out of mine and Chris's guitars, but beyond that, Tony is immediately, it immediately becomes a group effort, and Tony's a huge part. I got to say again, Tony's still one of the best things he brings to the band room is that Chris and I think we're done and we're ready to put our pencils down, and Tony is so ready to say, yeah, well, there's still some hair on that. What if we do this? What if we try that?
Right.
He really pushes us to spend the extra half an hour, take the extra step, and that might be why the tunes are a little bit longer on the second album.
Are they going to be a little bit more bluesy on this one, or?
I mean, I think they're both fundamentally blues albums. I think I might be playing a little bit more slide guitar on this one, so that I guess puts it more in that category.
Okay, that's very cool. And whereabouts, or is it the same studio type of situation as the last album?
We're still working on it in my basement. We are not ready to bring it to a studio quite yet. There's still some writing and some nuts and bolts to do on it, to work on it. But I would love to go back to the well and work with the same people. I can't imagine the Hourlies without working with Carl at this point. He really became a fifth member of the fifth Beatle.
Right.
During the Live With Yourself session.
How often do you guys get time to rehearse? I know Tony being in the Mugs also. I mean, he's doing kind of double duty. Does that interfere in any way? Are you guys able to get together and rehearse fairly often?
What's funny about that is you should, next time you see Tony or Danny, you should ask them where they practice.
No, are you kidding?
Because it's also at my house, but no, it's out of all of the people whose schedules we have to work around. Personally, I have a 9 to 5, and that's a little bit unusual in our world, and I'm the only one in our situation that has that convenience of a regular schedule like that. So for me, I'm locked in, and I just get my weekly text of which days Chris's job and Tony's other projects are going to let us squeak in, and it's pretty consistently once a week. And all bands dream, we all fantasize between songs about the multiple practices per week, and we never do. I don't know. You've been in bands.
Right.
It just doesn't happen.
No, it doesn't. And that's interesting you say that, because when I was talking to Danny during that interview, he'd mentioned that Tony was working on basically a solo album. Do you know if has he finished that? Has that ever come out?
There's a bunch of solo material. So, Tony's solo material comes out under artist name is Dude, not The Dude. Yeah, but I mean, there was Kid Gloves like 10 years ago or 100 years ago or whenever that was. And then there was Autobiography came out alongside the book he published. Oh, geez, that might be getting to be 2 or 3 years ago now. Tony's always talking about the next 2 albums.
Oh, okay.
He's got, every time I see him, he's got the next 2 albums written. He's thinking 10 years into the future.
Well, anyway, man, I'm going to let you go. I really appreciate you taking the time today to talk to me. Just want to say, like I said, the band is fantastic. I love the music. I love the energy. I love the wit of the songwriting, lyrically. Your playing is incredible. The whole band is really solid. I really look forward to this new recording you're talking about. Any idea when it might come out? I mean, are we talking this fall, next year?
Oh, no, we're talking
Next year? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I look forward to. I do remember one thing I meant to ask you. Were these EPs or that full length album available on hard copies as far as like CDs or anything like that? Were they available, or are they available that way?
You can buy a CD or a record copy of, I think, almost any one of those. I think we just don't have any more record copies of Signs or Symptoms, just by contacting the band.
Really? The latest album, you have that on vinyl?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely.
Now, is it available just through the band? I mean, do you sell it at your shows? Is it in any stores, or?
Your local neighborhood record store in Metro Detroit should have it in the local section. If you don't find it there, you can absolutely shoot us a message. We do everything independently, and we do not have an official storefront set up at the moment.
Again, thank you so much for taking the time, like I said, talking to me tonight. And like I said, I look forward to seeing you guys down the line. Anyway, Ben, again, thank you so much, and have a good night.
Thanks, Jimmy. You have a great night.
All right.
How's everybody doing? Feeling fun?
was Ben Kay from the Hourlies. He's the lead guitarist, or as he likes to say, the other guitarist. Extremely talented band. Like I said, they have 3 EPs out, one of which is live, and it's done incredibly well. The performances are great, the sound is great. If you haven't heard of this band, you definitely need to check them out. Like I said, a fantastic band, a total mix of rock, blues, punk, pop, a little R&B, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. You throw it all together and you get a high energy mix of great music that's totally fun. Check them out when you get a chance. Anyway, is that old stereo years giving you the blues? Maybe the receiver has a blown channel or the turntable just doesn't work right. Well, if that's true, then you should visit my friends at 7 Grand Audio Service. They've been in business for over 40 years, located at 25642 7 Mile Road in Redford. The owner, Dash, and his assistant, Harry, can fix just about anything. It doesn't have to be vintage, it can be new, it doesn't matter. But they can fix receivers, tape decks, turntables, EQs, power amps, and yes, guitar and bass amps. The phone number over there is 313-533-3635. They're open Monday through Friday, 10 to 6. Check them out and let them know Jimmy sent you. Anyway, with that being said, as I like to say, keep rocking.